We're good? Okay. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man walahu wa ba'd. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima alamtana wa zidna ilman ya rabbil alameen. O Allah, teach us what will benefit us and benefit us with what you've taught us and increase us in knowledge, O Lord of the worlds. So today we want to talk to you about three very important topics for the Muslim community. And if you walk away with anything from this lecture that myself and our brother Osama are going to present today, it is to do something. The instances of family members who pass away and their assets are in shambles, their documentation is scattered, the family don't know what they have and don't know where to go, is way too numerous. We have a responsibility to prepare ourselves for what we're going to leave behind. Now, if you'll see on the screen, I hope you guys can see the slides, because I'm seeing myself up there. It's the same? Now it's switched? Okay, great. Okay, so this is a disclaimer slide. Basically says that myself, everyone that I'm associated with in companies, and Osama and everything that he's associated with in companies, are simply providing educational material to you. We are not here as attorneys, financial planners, brokers, dealers, investment advisors, or anything. We're simply here to educate the community. The Prophet ﷺ, and this hadith is narrated in the Sunan of Abi Dawood, he ﷺ once was standing with his companions, and he took a stick and he drew a line in the dirt. And then around that line, he drew a square with one end of the line sticking out past the square. He then drew lines from one end of the box hitting the line that's in the middle. And he asked his companions, "Do you know what this is?" They said, "No, Allah and His Messenger know best." He said, "This is man. And this square that is around this line is his lifespan. Ajaluhu. And these lines that are going from the top and coming down and hitting the line in the middle, هذه هي الأعراض. إن أصابه هذا أخطأه هذا وإن أخطأه هذا أصابه هذا حتى يدركه الموت." If he's afflicted, أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, if he's afflicted by one setback, he's missed by another setback. If he's missed by one setback, he's hit by another setback until death catches up with him. And this portion outside of the box are his hopes, amaluhu. All of us, we have hopes. All of us, we have dreams, we have desires, we have things that we want to see happen. أينما تكونوا يدرككم الموت ولو كنتم في بروج مشيدة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, wherever you are, death will catch you, even if you are in lofty towers. We can do as much as we can, but we can't do everything. Given that, we should be prepared to do what we can, when we can, for the best outcome possible. Will there be loose ends? Yes. Will we not be able to do everything? Yes. But we should do as much as we can to make things easier for our families at the time of our deaths. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Every soul shall taste death. وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ بِالْحَقِّ ذَلِكَ مَا كُنْتَ مِنْهُ تَحِيدٌ. When the drunkenness of death comes to you, that is what you were avoiding. It's very difficult to think about death. It's considered shameful in some cultures to talk about death. In many cultures, it's considered shameful to talk even about sickness. But we have an obligation from Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam to talk about death. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said in the hadith narrated in the Tirmidhi, "Akthiru min dhikri hadhim al-ladhat al-maut." Remember much the destroyer of all of your pleasures, death. Studies have actually shown, and this is the one time that it's not as sensitive as it used to be, but it's the one time that I can say this type of professional area of study and it not be taken out of massive context. In the study of estate planning and the study of inheritance and probate and charitable giving, there is something called terror studies. What is terror studies? Does it have anything to do with the security apparatus of the United States government? Absolutely not. It has to do with the terror that we feel that we will die without a legacy. Even atheists have this fear, that they will die and be forgotten, which is why they still give charity, which shows that there's a meaning greater than themselves, does it not? So terror studies actually show that the more you talk about death with your family, the easier death you have and the easier they handle your death. But the less that you talk about death with your family, the inevitability seems to be far off. It seems like it's never going to happen. I look to my father as if he was invincible, as if nothing could affect him. And then when our father dies, like that, we don't just have a crisis, we have an existential crisis. We forget the meaning in our life because we were so connected to the persona of that loved one that we forgot that their soul, who they are as a person. That life is much longer. See, as Muslims, our lives are not from the time that we are born to the time that we die. We believe that our lives started when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took us from the back of our father Adam in that primordial plain of Arafah. قَالَ أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَى. He said, am I not your Lord? They said, yes, of course. Until when? Until Jannah and Nar. That's the life of a Muslim. The life of a Muslim is from that time to this time. So what is the time from the time that we're born until the time that we die? That's the test. Take all of those centuries and millennia, the average age of the ummah, as the Prophet ﷺ said, is between 60 and 70 years. Calculate all of that up in the grand scheme of time itself, and it's like you sat for an exam for 30 minutes or less. Which is why we have this reiteration about our lives being a test. So, أَكْثِرُ مِنْ هَذِهِ اللَّذَّاتِ. If you talk about death with your family, it's easier for them to conceptualize it, to gain resilience, and to understand what they need to do when you do die. And you will, as that is inevitable. So what is it that we should prepare for? We should be preparing to pay our debts off, to cover our funeral costs, to leave advice for our relatives, for there to be trusts to hold the inheritance of our minor children if we have them, for our inheritance to be distributed to those that Allah has ordered us to have it distributed to, that our charitable gifts are given to those we intend them to go to, and that if we have children, that we designate guardians for those children. Now, one thing that I have noticed is here in the States, actually let's go back one, here in the States, All of these things, if you live in a Muslim majority country, almost 2/3 of them are handled by the family law system in that country. Even if you die without a will, that it's going to happen. So when you come with that mindset here, oh, don't worry about it, it's okay. Government will take care of it. Government will take care of it, yes, right into their own pocket. But they will not take care of it in the way that you want it to be taken care of, nor will they take care of it in the way that Allah commanded you to take care of it in. So what are we talking about when we talk about Islamic estate planning? Estate planning is the planning of your estate. It's making a plan for the things that you leave behind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذَا حَضَرَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتُ إِن تَرَكَ خَيْرًا الْوَصِيَّةُ لِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ. Prescribed for you, commanded of you, demanded, obligated of you, when any of you is visited by death, and he leaves behind some goods, is to make a testament in favor of his parents and kinsmen, meaning his broader family, honorably. An obligation on the God-fearing. Do you want to be a person of taqwa? You will plan for when you are not here anymore. If you want to gain favor with Allah, if you want to implement the commands of Allah, you'll take seriously the necessity of doing something for yourself and your family to protect what you have and what you're going to leave behind. The Prophet ﷺ said, ما حق امرئ مسلم عنده ما يوصي به أن يبيت ليلتين إلا ووصيته مكتوبة عنده. In Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, it is not permissible for any Muslim who has something to will, something to leave behind, for them to sleep for 2 nights, except that their will and testament is written and in their possession, is written and with them. We don't have to do a show of hands, but think to yourself, do I actually have a will? What if I died tonight? What would my family be stuck with? Would they have what empowers them to do what is pleasing to Allah per the laws of the state of Texas? So when you die, this is a short breakdown of what happens with your money. First and foremost, your debts are going to be paid off. Number 2, if your funeral has not already been paid for, your funeral will be paid for out of the money that you leave. Number 3, if you leave what is called a charitable gift, and this is called the wasiyah portion of your tarika, of your remainder estate, or of your estate, then that will be given out. Charitable portion meaning, from when I die, I will that 10% of all of the value of property that I leave behind is given to Valley Ranch Islamic Center for their charitable endowment. Do you know that in most churches and synagogues in the United States, more than 10% of their yearly operating expenses are paid for by people who have attended those churches and synagogues, leaving money in their wills to the same places that they attended? We have more right to that than them. إِنَّمَا يَعْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ. Only those who believe in Allah are the ones that care for the houses of Allah. It's imperative that we support the masjids and Islamic centers and schools that have supported us. And you might be saying, brothers, what support? I just come here, I pray, and then I go back. MashaAllah. I remember one time making Umrah with some of the brothers between Mecca and Medina. We took a not so expensive bus, and therefore we were stopping at the not so expensive gas stations, and we stopped for Salat al-Fajr. And we said, where are we? Bus driver said, Salah. Okay, where are we supposed to go for salah? Ta'al, come with me. We walk off of the side of the road and we find a masjid. What is this masjid? It's old carpet and cement blocks and a little piece of zinc. What do they call it? Corrugated aluminum over the Qibla portion. And subhanAllah, it's like we traveled back in time 1400 years and prayed Salat al-Fajr. That's all that's necessary for a masjid. You don't have to have a dome and beautiful lighting and high ceilings and temperature controlled rooms and warm water in the winter and cold water in the summer. But you have that. And because you have that, and because you have so much more than that with excellent people who are here serving the community and programming for the community and amenities and all of that that's there, you should really think to yourself, have I thanked Allah for the ni'mah that He gave me by putting me in a community that provides me so much? So much that sometimes, and my point is, we don't realize the value that we get from the same Islamic centers that we attend. So make an intention that some of your money that you leave behind will be left as a sadaqah jariyah, as an ongoing charity in perpetuity to benefit the organizations that benefited you. Lastly is the remainder estate, known as al-irth or tarika, and that's divided up according to the quotients and the percentages that Allah has mentioned in the Quran. And although I'd love to go through all of that information with you, if we were to do that, then we would be here until next week. So we won't be going over that percentage base, but we'll cover a few top line issues that have to do with both charitable gifting and inheritance. Charitable gifting is restricted to 1/3 of your remainder, or 1/3 of your remainder estate. Meaning after you pay your funeral expenses and your debts off, let's just say you did that and you were left with $120,000, for example. Or let's make it even easier. You were left with $30,000, for example. You are allowed to, but not obligated to, give up to 1/3 of that $30,000 in charity. Meaning $10,000, no more, but it could be less. You could say, I want to give 1%, 2%, 5%, 7%, 10%. Get to 30%, no more than that can go to charitable gifting. Meaning giving it to someone who is generally not an inheritor, as an individual, an organization, or a cause. Anyone who's not an inheritor can receive this amount. And there is some debate about whether a person can inherit and receive of this amount that you can find discussions of on my website in more detail. Then we have the remainder estate. We said these are the quotients and the percentages that are mentioned by Allah in the Quran. If you have done one of three things, or you are in one of three situations, you cannot inherit from someone. If you are guilty of murdering the person that you are inheriting from, then you cannot inherit from them. If you are enslaved or in bondage, then you cannot inherit from them. And if you are of a differing faith, then you cannot inherit from them. Other than that, Allah has set that right aside for you in the Quran, and you cannot disenfranchise an inheritor that Allah has obligated to receive from you from the right that goes to them. People inherit based on percentages, or they take a remainder after the percentages have been given out. And in general, and you can find this article on my website, you will find that there are 7 situations in which men and women inherit from the deceased. In 3 of those situations, women inherit more than the men. In 1 situation, men and women inherit exactly the same, and in 3 situations, men inherit more than the women. So it is not true that men are always taking more than the women. It depends on the makeup of the family, which is surveyed at the time of death. But in every situation where someone gets more than another inheritor, they also have a preemptive obligation to support that person financially that took less. There's another tradition that goes into estate planning that is also a very important tradition in our faith tradition. And it is also called wasiyah. So we have the wasiyah as the 1/3 gift from the money, and then we have the wasiyah, that's the advice that you give to someone. Oh, thank you very much. What is the wasiyah that is giving advice in Western legal parlance? It's called a family declaration. It is not a binding legal document. It is a letter that you write to your family to tell them the things that you want them to hear after you've died. Now, if you look through from the earliest, and one of my students actually did this for me, Jazakallah khairan, you'll find that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu left a wasiyah, advice to his children. Umar left advice to his children. There are a few very famous examples of as well that have been printed, such as the wasiyah of Imam Abu Hanifa. There's the wasiyah of an Imam al-Ghazali called Ayyuha al-Walad, which is said to have been written to one of his children or to one of his students. And then there's the wasiyah of Abu al-Walid al-Baji, the great scholar of Al-Andalus, who wrote a wasiyah to his twin boys. So in it you want to say the things that you can't say now. So how do I get a will? What's the way that I go about to get a will document? Now, why are we talking about this in the first place? And I'm going to be very frank here, because every time I go to communities, inevitably somebody will say this: brother, why do we care about the kuffar legal system? Why do we care about that? Just do it Islamically and forget about everything else. Okay, go ahead and do that. But you live as a citizen and or a resident of the country that you are in, whether you like it or not, those laws will be applied to you. That's almost like saying, brother, who needs a driver's license? Just get the car and drive. And then when the cops stop you and you get jailed, you go, oh, it was dhulm, why are you? That was something that you were able to do and you chose not to do it. So why are we up here talking about this? Because we want Muslims to empower themselves to do what is pleasing to Allah without complicating things for themselves or costing them and their family even more money. And it will be costly, because if you die without a will, it's called dying intestate. And what happens is when you die, your family wants to gain access to your bank accounts and your retirement and all of this other stuff. And they go, and the bank goes, oh, why are you here? Oh, he died. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I'm also sorry I can't give you access. Why not? I'm his wife, I'm his daughter, I'm his son, I'm so-and-so. No, I'm sorry. We need you to have a court order. You have to go to court. Whether you like it or not, you will go to something called probate court. And if you do not have a will, then two things will happen. The court will tell you, okay, we're going to divide this person's money according to state law, not your Islamic law. And number two, we are going to appoint an administrator to do all of the things that you should be doing, which means it's going to cost money, so therefore we're going to fine you, or we're going to charge fees and take money for that. So you are inevitably disenfranchising your family by not preparing a will and making sure that you're in legal good standing with these documents. You might be young, and for everyone that's still at home, that's 18 and above, and we all have family members that are 18 and above, they're still, it's no big deal. I don't have any money anyway. If you're 18 and above, even if you still live with your parents, you still need a will. Do you know why? Because if you don't, and you don't state in your will who you want to claim your body if you were to die, or what you want to be done with your medical care if you are in trouble, your family will generally not be able to have much say. So even if you have nothing, you have the amana of caring for the Muslim body that you leave as a corpse to be buried properly. And I've seen it actually. We had a case in Houston where a brother was working for one of the local Muslim businesses. Nobody knew of his family. He, subhanAllah, suddenly passed away. It was a convert. He was from some far off town in, middle of, like past Midland or something, Nobody, The only thing there are like cattle and tumbleweed, right? And so they buried him, and then 2-3 weeks later, family shows up. They sued the business, they sued the city, they sued the Islamic Center, they sued everybody they could get their names on. Why? Because we're next of kin, and you buried him without our permission. So that one document, that one piece of paper that says, if I die, I want to be buried as a Muslim, and the local Islamic Center has the right to bury me, saves so much problems for yourself as well as for the Muslim community as a whole. So how do you get a will? There are 3 ways. One way, you can go to bed tonight having obeyed Allah and His Messenger, even if you don't have a big fancy drafted will from a lawyer or a will from an online service. You can go tonight having fulfilled this commandment. Take out a piece of paper, it has to be handwritten. Take out a piece of paper and write, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, I, Joe Bradford, in sound mind, leave my money to my family according to the rules of Islamic inheritance, and I appoint Sheikh Osama to assist my family in dividing that up, and I should be buried as a Muslim, and then sign it and date it like you would sign and date one of your checks. And if you have a voided check that you've signed, to put with that as well. And if you die tonight and your family takes that to a Texas probate court, it will be accepted. Is it the top tier of what you could have? No. But brothers and sisters, please understand that there is perfect and there is done. No, brother, I have to get my will drafted by the top lawyer in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and then I have to have both Sheikh Omar and Sheikh Yasser review it, and then I have to have it encrusted in gold and placed into a frame. Brother, you don't need all of that. If your will is written on a piece of scratch paper, it will be enough as long as you have done that the way that you should. So the first thing is called a holographic will. It's not Star Wars holograph, okay? It's just holographic because it's physical in front of you. It is risky, it is challengeable, but guess what? It is something. And if you don't have any will, please go to bed tonight having written that down. You will go to bed tonight having obeyed Allah, obeyed His Messenger, and protected yourself and your family. And then when you wake up tomorrow, you can go and look into the other means that are available. You can also use a local lawyer. Now, a local lawyer can be potentially pricey because they might want to charge you a lot for the back and forth, and you might want to do a bunch of customization. They may or may not know the rules of Islamic inheritance and how to codify those into a contract. But I always tell people, if you have a net worth now, right now, generally, I don't believe that you need to use a lawyer for every situation in the community. But if you have a net worth now of $5 million or more, and you see that growing to where it may be $11 million at the time of you dying, and that's the federal limit for the inheritance tax right now, then yes, you may want to have a lawyer draft that because you need tax planning along with the estate planning to protect that money. But if you have a house and a car and maybe your retirement account, then you don't need to spend thousands of dollars just to be able to protect that. So there is a place for our Muslim lawyers that offer those services. I highly recommend that if you need those services that you use them. But there are also other services that are affordable, such as, full disclosure, I am the co-founder of mywasiyah.com, and mywasiyah.com is a service that you can go online, you can take an online interview. It takes the data that you give it about yourself and your family. It asks you questions about the state that you live in and the state, and if you'll move in the next couple of years. And then it collates all of that into a legally valid, Sharia compliant will that you can then sign and go to sleep understanding that you have protected your family in the best way possible and the most affordable way possible. We created it as what we call a one-size-fits-most product. meaning that most Muslims don't need to spend hundreds, if thousands of dollars. This product costs, I think, $150 to do everything. If you're in, Texas, it's $150. In others, it's $99 because of community property laws that go along with this. But the idea is it's an affordable solution to be able to protect yourself and your family and implement that which is pleasing to Allah and His Messenger. There are a few other options out there as well, and you can check those out. But the thing that we want you to do is we want you to be able to do something. Like I said, if there's one thing you leave here tonight with, it is the imperative to take action on this knowledge and to not delay. Now, what should your estate plan include? First and foremost, I should probably rephrase this slide. Your Islamic estate plan must include a legally valid Sharia compliant will. Number 2, must. That's an absolute must. Absolutely need to pass away with that. Whether you handwrite it tonight before you go to sleep, and believe me, I had a handwritten one for a little while before before we helped the brother and I helped develop my wasiyah. So you must have a will. All of the other things here are things that are nice to have. Family declaration. You can do this on your own. You can simply write it out. Think about the things that you want to say to your family after you die. If you want help with prompts on what to talk about, there's a great book out there. It's called Talking About Death Over Dinner. And the idea is that you start to prompt these conversations with your family over dinner. It's a very, very well-written book. Number 2, we said the will. We talked about that. Number 3, an advanced medical directive, sometimes called a living will. Basically, it's the instructions for your family on what to do when you have medical problems and you can't answer those questions. You're comatose, you're unresponsive, and if I were to average the number of phone calls that I get yearly, I get them around 2 times of the year. But if I were to average it out, probably 2 calls a month. So, 24 to 25 calls a year of families going, oh my God, my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, they're in the hospital and I'm being asked to pull the plug. I don't want to be a murderer. I don't want to kill my family member. What do I do? Because they're extremely stressed in a situation that is very highly stressful. So part of caring for your family is having the conversations with them about how you want to be able to be cared for after life, and an advanced medical directive, and you can get it from the state attorney's website. There's a form that they have for the state of Texas. You can get that form from them and use it. And what that will do is that will give information to your family about what type of treatment, what type of quality of life you will want to have if something were to happen. A durable power of attorney is very important if you have financial issues that you need to be taken care of after you pass or when you're incapacitated. Also, if you travel internationally, if you go for Hajj or for Umrah, or you go back home to visit family. When I go back to the country that I'm from, you guys might have heard of it, it's called Detroit, then, I leave a durable power of attorney with my sister, and therefore she can act on my behalf. She can take my kids to the doctor, she can pay my bills, whatever she needs to do. So durable power of attorney essentially allows that person to act in a limited capacity to fulfill the things that you can't do while you're there. A trust, if needed. There's a misnomer in the Muslim community that you have to have a trust. And this stems from 2 things. It stems from some of the first communities in the United States to really catch on to estate planning, being in states where trusts are popular for tax protection, like Massachusetts and California, and because many people had very high net worth and therefore trusts were appropriate for their tax planning. But if you just have a house and a car and all of the kind of normal middle class, lower middle class, slightly upper middle class life, that you don't have lots of money but you're earning, probably don't need a trust. When do you need a trust? We mentioned high net worth, that's one. The second is extremely important, it's extremely important for you to execute on early, but it doesn't apply to many of you, but it may to some, and that is a special needs trust. If you have a special needs child, in order to protect the wealth that you leave to that child and not disrupt their medical rights and funding from the state or the federal government or grants or whatever else, you will need a special needs trust. And you will need an attorney to draft a special needs trust. And that attorney not only needs to live in the state that you live in, they need to know the laws of the county that you live in. Because many of these things are very county specific when it comes to children. I implore you, please, if you have a special needs child, take this seriously. I'm a board member of Dar as-Sakina, which is a special needs support organization in Houston, Texas. We provide education, respite care, and a number of support services to special needs families. And more often than not, we stigmatize special needs families. Special needs families stigmatize themselves and they feel like they're not welcome. And many times they leave off doing this type of work until it's too late for the child, and then you have other legal hurdles to be able to prove that they are viable on their own or that they need a guardian, and it becomes more difficult the older the child gets. So if you need a trust because of that, please take that into consideration. Number 6, if you live in one of the 9 community property states, then you need something called a marital property agreement or a transmutation agreement. Do you have to have it? No, you don't have to have it. If you agree that you and your spouse are going to split your money 50-50, that's fine, as long as you consciously agree to that. But also you need to understand that if you agree to that, you're also agreeing to bear the debts of each other 50-50. So a lot of times, and ladies, I say this is a message that I'm sending to you ladies from a sister that's a client of mine. She asked me to tell this story anytime I talk in communities. She said, if you consciously want to do this with your spouse, fine. But understand that having a prenuptial agreement with your husband is not against you. It's actually in your favor. She got married, wonderful man, families were all in agreement. She wanted to get a prenup. Her parents said, no, he's a good man. He'll take care of you. You should get you don't need a prenup. Everyone was telling her, if you get a prenup, he's going to take all the money, he's going to leave you with nothing. A prenup does not protect the man only. A prenup protects the man and the woman. And you can literally put anything in a prenup that you want with regards to property and earnings and how they're divided. You cannot predeterminedly determine child care and custody, that's another thing. But you can determine whose debts, if we bear debts, are we going to bear them together or are we going to bear them separately? If we earn this or buy this property, how are we going to treat it? Why did she say to give this, tell this story to the community? Because she said when she went through a divorce, what she found when things went sour between her and her husband is that her husband, because they had conjoined financial liabilities and responsibilities under the law, and this is a Christian concept, the unity concept, there's great videos by attorney Naveed Hussain about this from Chicago on YouTube. The unity idea of marriage says that as it shall be in heaven, so shall it be on earth. So you and your husband, you and your wife, you're one and the same. What was her husband doing? Signing documents, loan documents, business agreements for thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So when they divorced, what happened? She took on half of those debts that she had no idea had been signed in her name. She also had to forfeit half of all of her retirement in her 401k and her IRA and everything else. And because her husband, no surprise here, was not reporting all of his income on his taxes and was doing some issues with taxes as well, he ended up earning less than her, and she pays him support in the state that they live in. Full disclosure, they're not here in the masjid right now, nor are they here in the state right now. This is another state, but this is a true story. So ladies, do not discount the fact that a prenup can be very beneficial for you, and a marital property agreement, even after you're married, can protect you. And I will say this as well, because this is another big problem. Not to pick on the ladies, but it's for your benefit. Ladies, if your husband has a will, that doesn't apply to you. Men, if your wife has a will, it doesn't apply to you. Each individual has to have a will. If you die with a will and your spouse dies without a will, guess what's going to happen? Your spouse's will be used for their estate, and your estate will be judged according to state law. So you need your own will. Why? Because in front of Allah and in front of the law and in front of the Shari'ah, you are an individual that is responsible for your financial rights and responsibilities. And then lastly is life insurance. And notice that we put if needed, because quite frankly, not everybody needs life insurance. Why are we talking about life insurance? Because life insurance is one of those issues that the initial reaction of everybody is, what do you mean? I thought that was haram, right? The very first thing that people think. You have to realize that, and this is one of the beauties of living in the United States, is freedom of contract. Unlike people in Europe, unlike people in South America, unlike people in countries in Africa and Asia, we pretty much can agree to do pretty much anything as long as it follows the laws of contract. Which is why we can have an Islamic will in the United States. You cannot have an Islamic will in certain countries. You will follow the wills that they give you, whether it comes from the church or whether it comes from a secular government. But in the United States, alhamdulillah, you can have an Islamic will. Why am I mentioning this about insurance? Because there are three main questions about insurance that have to be answered when we talk about structuring a company and how it can operate. Number one, how is the company structured? Is it a mutual company where there are no owners, but everybody is sharing the expenses and sharing the gains? Kind of like a credit union, but for life insurance. Kind of like a jam'iyya in Arabic, or in Somali ayuto, right? And I don't know any other languages other than those two. But you get the idea, where everybody puts in money in a pot and they share that money over time. So conventional insurance, the majority of scholars agree that it is not permissible, because you have shareholders who are profiting from the contributions of the policyholders. Whereas in mutual insurance, you have policyholders contributing to an investment account. That investment account files the claims of the policyholders, pays them back the money if there's more than needed, or gives them discounts on future insurance if there's more than needed. And it's very common here in the United States, tons of mutual insurance companies. So if you have a mutual insurance company, all scholars agree that it's permissible. Then you have to ask yourself, how do they invest the insurance premium pool? Do they invest it in things that are ethical and halal or not? And then lastly is, and this is important for everybody who asks themselves about insurance, is do you have an insurable interest for the policy that you need? So I personally see that if a person has a very low-risk lifestyle, they're working from home, they have lots of savings, they've taken care of all of their retirement, and they really don't have any kind of outstanding issues or danger, probably don't need insurance. But if you, for example, a single-family earner, you have no, you have a number of debts, you have no family in the area, and other considerations, then it can be part of a proper financial planning and estate planning strategy, but it is not the sum total. The problem that I had with almost all insurance companies until I met Osama was, and I'm not saying that facetiously, right, was the fact that most people that are insurance brokers are only trying to sell you a policy. Sell, 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 sell. And Osama was the first person, he'll tell you, I mean, we went back and forth for a very long time, I wanted to see how he dealt with people and hear from them. And alhamdulillah, Ikhlas Insurance is one of those companies where they're trying to see what's best for you, not simply sell you a policy that you might not need. And I've seen people who have been sold policies that they don't need, and they're stuck paying thousands of dollars a month, and they won't stop because they feel that if they do, they'll lose all of the value that they put in and all of this other things. So some thought has to go into having an insurable interest in whether you really need that policy or not. For example, maybe from work, your employer gives you insurance for free. Life insurance, disability insurance, health insurance, that is a gift from them to you. It is completely permissible for you to take. You don't have to worry about its source or anything like that, because money is not going to be received until you die later. You don't have anything to do other than to receive it. But if you're going to electively take on an insurance policy, then you want to take into consideration these things. Talking about an insurable interest, and I'm going to hand it off over to Osama, you want to think about, how old am I? If you are in your 50s, the price and cost of an insurance policy will drastically be different than if you are in your 20s or 30s. And therefore, it might actually, if you're a little bit older, it might be actually better for you to ramp up your investments than it would be to put money into an insurance policy. Are you married or not? You know, one of my teachers, he used to always say to me, you know, not all men are wise. Some are married as well. I'm lucky to count myself from the wise. So if you're married, right? If you are married, then you need to consider what you want the money to be done, right? Your policy might be a little bit more, or if you're married, you actually might be able to get an add-on policy for your wife as well, right? Which would then strengthen your family's financial standing if something were to happen. How many family members do you have? How much are you actually going to need to be able to replace the income that you have and pay off the debts that your family might be stuck with when you pass away? And of course, do you have any outstanding loans that are considered debt? So taking all of that information into consideration is very important before jumping in to an insurance policy. Why? Because as I said, an insurance policy is one part of a financial plan. It's one part of an estate plan, but it is not the be-all, end-all solution that many people will try to sell you upon. So you might not even need it at all, and it's important to go through the process to find out whether you do or not, and if you do, what's going to be the best for the situation that you're in, not just what's going to be, you know, the Cadillac of all insurance policies that you'll be stuck paying and be in, you know, financial stress because of. And with that, I'll pass it off to Osama to talk about the next couple of slides.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Joe, for all of your insights. Definitely life insurance, as our beloved esteemed Sheikh said, is something that usually, oftentimes Muslims have a jerk reaction to, of saying that this is something that is haram, right? And there's no way I would even look into it or let alone purchase it. That's actually the same feeling I had when I entered the insurance industry over 15 years ago. And so much so that I did my own research before I even had any specializations and understanding and working in the industry or anything like that. So much so that when I studied and took the test for my license, I only did it for health insurance. I wasn't even licensed to do life insurance. And I stayed that way up until I started studying and being involved in the insurance industry, see how these life insurance policies work, being involved in my Muslim community, seeing people in our community passing away, and families are required sometimes where they don't have any money. You have communities trying to raise funds for them with GoFundMes and launch goods and all of that. So families are going through a lot of stress. And even at the masjid that I participate in locally, janazah costs are very, very high. And it's really demanding upon the family to, one, they lost someone who's dear and loved to them, and they're trying to balance the emotion between that, as well as not knowing if they have even enough money, or they have to go begin to ask family or their community or friends on how to muster up the money to even cover the janazah expenses. And janazah expenses are climbing. Until I saw different views, even in 2018 at the American Muslim Jurists of America conference, EMJA, it was held in Houston. One of the scholars there, he made a fatwa that life insurance is halal, and there was many scholars there that were against him. I read his fatwa and even had an opportunity to discuss matters with him. I wasn't 100% comfortable with that to the extent to be able to sell it from our own company. But then we had the opportunity to get to know Sheikh Joe Bradford, and I had seen a video that he had done online, which is actually even available on our website as well, where he explains how life insurance is halal. Someone who's coming from the insurance industry, it made a lot of sense to me, because there's certain policies where I know for sure I can't see how anyone can argue that this can be permissible. And then there were some insurance policies where I thought, you know what, why not, right? So after, as Sheikh Joe said, after discussions with him, alhamdulillah, after several discussions, he's the official Shari'ah compliance advisor for our business, as well as he does for many other businesses, mashallah. Because we're very concerned to ensure, not just for the people that we ask that want to purchase it, but also for anybody who tries to offer something like this, that even the wealth that you get from this, that inshallah it is halal. So through Sheikh Joe's view on this, life insurance can be compliant under specific circumstances. And this is what we follow personally at our company. So there's 3 different types of life insurance policies that he has deemed to be permissible. Now, just because a life insurance company would be considered Shari'ah compliant, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the insurance policies offered by this life insurance company are compliant as well. So first and foremost, with Sheikh Joe, we vet the companies, make sure it's Shari'ah compliant, then the insurance policies themselves to see if they're compliant as well. So from all the different policies, and we're still doing our research to see if we can work and provide more options, but right now the options are going to be either a whole life policy, a term life policy, or a final expense policy. So we just wanted to, inshallah, educate everybody in the community about the different options that are out there. Now, let's begin with the whole life policy, which I'm not a big fan of. Whole life policies, they have a permanent death benefit, meaning that when you purchase a whole life policy, you have it until death, right? So term, you have it for a specific period of time. With a whole life policy, it can last you into your 70s, 80s, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes your soul, you'll have your life insurance policy until then, so as long as you pay your monthly premiums. There's no maximum death benefit, so you can get however much you need. We do have a questionnaire to see what is reasonable for you. Also, there's a savings component where with a whole life policy, you're essentially mixing a life benefit with an investment benefit, right? Because with the whole life policy, you're building cash value. And that cash value, you can withdraw it at some point, or unfortunately, many times we've been getting a lot of phone calls because some things have gone viral, whether on TikTok or Instagram, where people have these videos where it says, be your own bank, right, Sheikh Joe?
Yeah.
Be your own bank by getting a whole life insurance policy. You can take loans and you can become rich that way. So absolutely, that's not something that we recommend doing with a whole life policy at all, because when you take money out of your whole life policy, and you can only borrow from what your cash value is, and your cash value is not really going to be worth anything up until having the policy for about 5-10 years plus. So when you take and you borrow from your policy, you're actually going to have to, just like any other bank, you're going to have to pay interest, anywhere between 4 to 8% interest. And that interest is owed to the insurance company because you took a loan against it. So obviously this is not something that we would recommend. Now, the other unfortunate thing is, you may see that your cash value is building with a whole life policy. However, when you pass away, your family's only getting the face value. So if you get a life insurance policy for $500,000, $1 million, your family is not getting the $500,000 or the $1 million when you pass away. They're getting that, but they're not getting the additional cash value. So they're not getting the 500K or the million plus the cash value that was built, right? They're only getting the life benefit. So essentially you're losing whatever you thought you were investing in that sense. Also, whole life policies are very, very, very expensive. Almost 3 to 6 times more expensive monthly than a term life policy. And to be honest with you, the majority of the people that strongly push whole life policies, it's because, without a doubt, for people who sell it, the commission is significantly higher for the insurance agent who sells it, as well the life insurance company themselves, they make much more. And as Sheikh Joe said when he was looking around, seeing that there's different types of brokers or agents that sell different policies, unfortunately, a lot of people, they take advantage of people with these matters. And they make a lot of money off of whole life policies. And what we have come to a conclusion of is that if you want to invest, you should probably invest on your own terms. For example, if you take a whole life policy and the monthly premium is $700, $800, $1,000 a month, the equivalence of that face value of $1 million, $2 million, with a term policy would probably be $100, $150, maximum $200 a month. So if you're going through a financial crisis after 5-6 years of having that whole life policy, if you stop paying on your whole life policy, what's going to happen? You're going to lose everything. All the cash value that you built, as well as the life policy. You forfeit it because you're unable to afford to pay it any longer. Whereas if you're going through a financial crisis and you have a term life policy, you may be paying $50, $100, $150 a month. A lot of them you can get them for under $100 a month. You can still essentially usually afford that more than affording something that's over $600, $700 a month, right? And then if you can afford a whole life policy, you take that difference. You take a term life policy where it could be $100, maybe $50 a month. If you could put that $500, $600 into a mutual fund or into an IRA or any other way to invest your funds, you can pause your investment if you're going through a financial crisis. But you can't pause paying your whole life policy. So unfortunately, we don't want people to get to that point. So with a term life policy, it's much more realistic and easier to hold, and it serves for the benefit of what you're looking for. With a whole life policy, it guarantees that there's a death benefit during a specific term. So with term life policies, you can usually get a term life policy from 10, 15, 20, or even 30 years, depending on your age. And that's something we assist you with to see what would be best for you to qualify for. Now, there's no cash value to this, so there's you can't even be tempted to go into a situation where you take a loan against it or anything like that. If you stop paying it, of course, the policy lapses and you don't have the policy anymore. But again, the monthly premiums are significantly less depending on how much you want. I mean, if you want less than $500,000, you could easily get it for under $100 a month, depending on your age as well, and depending on what the term that you are trying to apply for. Again, the term life policy serves its benefit. You are coming into an agreement that this is the amount of assistance that my family needs after I pass away. So when we talk to clients, we say, do you have a spouse? How long would it take for them to get back onto their feet after you pass away? How old are your children? How old is your youngest child? I only have 2 kids, but I'd like to have more, right? So we try to help them plan out all of these different things. Unfortunately, this is not a fun subject to talk about, but when you do this, your family is definitely able to go through that sad and terrible loss of losing their loved one, and it makes that whole circumstance much easier for them, inshallah. Now, what options do you have when your term life expires? Because some people say, well, you know what, I pay for it for 20 years, 30 years, but it stops. What's the point? Well, the point is, if you want something whole, as we discussed before, it's not a very good deal for you, right? Even though, like I said, a lot of people may disagree with me, I'm pretty convinced that the ones who disagree with me, that are in the industry, are just trying to make a nice commission or something like that. But at the same time, with term life policy, you can achieve your goals. All I would say is separate what the purpose of what you're looking for, right? Don't mix your investment with your life insurance benefit, right? Leave your investment by itself, and you can stop it whenever you want to stop it, and you can continue when you want to continue, and make sure you have something to cover your family's needs if something, God forbid, la samahullah, were to happen to you. You can convert your policy into a permanent policy or you can renew for another term, or you could just allow the policy to terminate. Now, usually people that are purchasing term policies for 20, 30 years, they get it in their 30s, they get it for a very, very, very low premium, and then by that time, someone who's getting it in their 30s or early 40s, mashallah, they're probably thinking about their financing, they have their investments right. By the time they're in their 60s or 70s, they've put aside their investments, their retirement, and inshallah they should be fine by then. This serves to protect your family during your breadwinning years, and again, it fulfills that purpose. So essentially, that's how the whole life and the term life policies work. Now, there are different other types of whole life policies. They're called universal life policies. Now, these are very much so interest-based, and we don't recommend those. Now, whole life policies with specific companies, we're okay with them, but again, we would be more comfortable with you leaning towards the term life plans. Now we come to a different type of whole life policy. Now, this whole life policy is more for people age 60 and older. They're called final expense plans, or we like to call them, kind of for people in our community, janaza plans, right? Janaza policies. So how this plan works is the death benefit is significantly less. This is for the people that they're 60 plus now, they want a life insurance policy to cover their janaza expenses. They didn't get a policy in their 30s or 40s to get a low premium or anything like that, and they're living off of their social security checks. They're living paycheck to paycheck. If they were to pass away, definitely someone, the community or family members would have to come in and assist them, and they want to take it upon themselves. You know what? I don't want to trouble anybody when I pass away. I want to get something like this to ensure that it's covered. I don't want any GoFundMes for me or launch goods or anything like that. Just pass away, and everything, inshallah, will be made easy. So with that, you can get anywhere between a $5,000 to a $30,000 death benefit. Now, janazas, from personal experience, they're pretty expensive, you know, especially in our communities.
a lot of communities around the US, mashallah, they have volunteers that do the washing of the body, and they don't require any fees or anything. However, you have places where they charge up to 500, maybe even more, for washing the body. And then you have transportation and storage of the body, right? So we're trying to do the burial as soon as possible, but sometimes the body is kept in storage for a day or 2 days. Sometimes people say, delay the janazah because we have family coming from overseas, or we have family coming from different states that we want to make sure that they're there. So that in itself is also an expense. And also picking up the body from the hospital or from the home, and then taking the body from the masjid for the janazah prayer and transferring the body to the funeral home. All of this has expenses anywhere between $1,200 to $3,000. Again, these numbers vary in different communities. We help people nationwide, so these vary in different communities. Burial service. So this is basically the open and close fee, right? So when you dig. When they dig into the ground. Now, I don't know what the laws here in Texas are, but I know in many different places you have to have a vault, right? A cemented area. I don't know if you guys have to do that here, and where you have to close and all of that. They don't allow you to do it 100% Islamically, right? So that is very expensive. So that is anywhere between $3,000 to $6,000. And then the cost of the actual grave plot, that's at least $2,000 plus, right? If not more. Again, these numbers vary, but as you see, these numbers add up and it becomes very, very expensive. Making a janazah costs anywhere between $6,000 to $15,000. And I heard in California, Muslims are paying $20,000 plus to bury people for in their janazahs. So I'm not too sure exactly how the numbers are here, but this is generally an average of how much janazahs are costing people around the US. So essentially, these are the different types of policies. We usually would recommend a term life policy for someone, who's starting in their breadwinning years, has a family, taking care of their family. Even if you're younger, you could definitely get it for a lower price. And then this would be more so for people that are age 60 and older. Obviously, the closer you are to 60, now with life insurance policies, the rate will never increase. The rate is guaranteed. So the younger you are when you get it, the better it is for the individual, because you get to maintain that premium. It stays fixed, right? Unless you have a whole life policy and people borrow and do all this nonsense, then you lose from your benefit, and then they may increase your monthly premium, things of that nature. But with a term life policy and a final expense policy, you don't run into these issues, inshallah. So with that, we open the floor for our community to ask Sheikh Joe, inshallah.
One thing, and notice that it says, so I'm always want to be conscious of, number one, salah times and anything. And then, of course, we have to be respectful to the community members and the elders that are expecting to pray at a certain time and the adhan to be given. So shall we give the adhan and then do the Q&A, so at least we have the adhan covered? Okay. اللهم آتنا الوسيلة والفضيلة يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك استغيث اصلح لي شأني كله ولا
Assalamu So, do you need to have trust to avoid probate? And is wasiya enough? And how long the wasiya should be?
I'm pointing you to that brother who's looking, who had his hand up. Okay, and then I'll answer his question. And ask your question one more time. Okay. Excellent question. So let me repeat the question. So number one is, do you have to have a trust in order to avoid probate? And number two is your will enough to avoid probate? And if so, what's the frequency that you need to renew or update your will? Which will be taken and used in court? These are all excellent questions. So let me start backwards. Your most recently signed and executed will is the one that will be used at court, regardless of whether you signed it yesterday or 10 years ago. If it was signed and executed properly, it will be effective in court. You do not need to update your will every year, or every several years, unless you've had a drastic change in where you live. Let's say, for example, you move from state to state, right? Or you've had a significant change in, say, family makeup. Someone has died, someone has been born, and then that's really all you need to change it for. And the more important of those two is the issue of moving. So if you move, you always want to make sure that your most current legal address is going to be the one that is used, or you have forwarded the previous address to the current one. If your will was drafted properly, then it should take into consideration for later born children, meaning children that were born after the will was created, or people who have died after the will was created. Now, so that was the first question about whether you need to update which will be taken. As I said, that's the one that was most recently executed. So if you have you should never have more than one copy of your will ever. There should be one properly executed copy that you keep in a place that is accessible by your heirs. Not in a safe, not in a safe deposit box, right? Preferably your sock drawer. I personally keep mine in my sock drawer. Why? Because if I pass away, all of my children know that Dad's will is in his sock drawer. And they can easily open the They go there taking my socks anyway. So they're going to know exactly where to access it. But if I had it in a safe or at the bank, or you do not need to have your will registered with the county. You do not need to give it to the courthouse. It does not need to be stored by a lawyer. It simply has to be executed properly and in a place which is accessible to your heirs. Thirdly, is your will enough to avoid probate? And if you have a trust, will you avoid probate? You will never avoid probate. You will only make probate easier. So if you have a will, what will happen is you will go to the court and they will say, do you have the death certificate of your relative? Yes. Are you, or is the person they named as, does your relative have a will? Yes. The court will then look at the will and see it was executed properly, meaning signed properly, right? Who is the person that's designated as administrator or executor or appointee in the will? It could be a couple of different terms used. Basically, the person who will take the will and implement it. It might be you, it might be somebody else. The court will issue an order that person does what the will says, and that's all that you really have to do. Now, if you don't have a will, what the court is going to do is appoint a court administrator for you, and then it can take anywhere from 2 to 4 years for that entire process to be completed, what they call the probate process. So you will never avoid probate. You will only make it easier. Also, people say, if you have a trust, you will avoid probate. You will only avoid probate per the assets that are in the trust. So the will, or the assets that will go to probate will, number one, be excluded from the probate process if you have a will that mentions them, or if they were put into a trust, or if they were part of, they were gifted, sold, or bequeathed to a family member before you died. What do I mean by that? I'm sorry, assigned, gifted, or sold to a family member before you died. If you have a 401k at work, when you signed up, you had to sign something called a beneficiary designation. That beneficiary designation means that that money will go directly to that person. So you want to make sure that, in talking about updating paperwork, you don't have to update your will every year, but you should be looking at your beneficiary documentation every year. And if you have a trust, you can assign the trust as a beneficiary, so that then the trust will receive all of that money and hold it for your family and distribute it. Or that money will simply go to whoever is there, or you can also designate it to the estate, to your estate. But you'll have to speak to HR and talk to your company about how what they allow for to be written as a beneficiary. Long story short, unless something has been sold by contract, gifted with a clear gift receipt, or assigned like an insurance policy benefit or a retirement benefit, then it needs to be protected by a will or by a trust. However, you will still have to go through the probate process. It can be long or short depending upon the sophistication of your documentation. Yes. So the brother here.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I just wanted to say Jazakumullah khair. I think it's very essential that our community has financial education. And there's a lot of terms and language with finances, especially in the West. So it's very helpful to have people just talk about a lot of these big topics, which is very much in relation to our obligations as Muslims. So the question I first had, so there's two bigger things I wanted to address. One is on that slide where you talked about the 7 components of an Islamic estate. I know, alhamdulillah, you've covered the aspect of a legally valid and Shari'ah compliant will, and the potential usage of mywasiya.com. We've talked about life insurance, but if we're talking about advanced medical directive and durable power of attorney, whether that's for ourselves or we have to do that for our parents, how do we go about doing that? That's one question. The other question is, I heard some brothers in Chicago talking about green cemeteries. And so there are cemeteries that wouldn't require a coffin or things like of that nature. So do you know anything about that? Do you know if that exists in Texas? Are there options? I guess maybe even the community here can comment if there are Muslim graves in those types of areas. And I've also been told that getting the land now is probably good for if you're getting it for your family member. To get the land at the graveyard is better to do now before land prices and things like that increase. So those are a couple of things I want to ask.
Great, those are 3 great questions. So the first one, which is with regards to the advanced medical directive and the durable power of attorney, those you can easily do through many free services online, like nolo.com or Rocket Lawyer. You can download them from the state attorney's office of whatever state that you live in. Essentially, the hardest part of an advanced medical directive is actually deciding what quality of life means for you and what kind of medical service you would want. Having that and then communicating that to your family. But kind of standard documentation or templates are easily available for that. We have not, unfortunately, made that available through our website right now. We've been focused just on the wills, but hopefully we can add that in the near future. Secondly is about the funeral costs and buying the plot of land. I would say the best thing to do is to talk to your local funeral director in the area that you live or in the area where you're buying a plot for your parents. I mean, I know that there's an Islamic center in Houston that recently bought a very large bulk purchase of plots. and they can get discounts on that, so it becomes cheaper. If you get what Osama had talked about, a final expense plan, then the cost of the lot would be included in that as part of the expense and be covered. So you wouldn't have to necessarily buy in a physical location. You would simply be buying the ability to have them buried wherever they are if they passed away. So that's a plus with that. As far as green funerals, I know that the laws differ state to state. For example, I know that Kentucky has always allowed them. Some states make you have a vault, others say you simply have to have a pine box. Because of kind of the natural living type of movement that's become popular in the US, some states have started to allow for, if it doesn't affect the water table and there's no fear that the bodies would essentially float back up in instances of a flood, they will allow for just being buried in the kafan. But that really depends state to state and sometimes county to county. So I would just check on the areas where you are. And the ruling on that is that, yes, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was to be buried in the shaq or the laht, and to be buried in the kafan. And that when there is a necessity to do more than that for the preservation of the body to not be disturbed and taken out of its grave, then it should be done only up to what is necessary. So should a Muslim have an extravagant casket? Absolutely not. But if the law says they have to have at least a pine box, or, and excuse the term, that Tupperware thing that they use in certain states, or the concrete vault because of the water table, then you do, to the extent that you're obligated to do and not go any more extravagant. It's an unfortunate thing that we find Muslims kind of spending lots of money on caskets, spending lots of money on headstones, and it is it's a classic case of salesmanship, where funeral directors find you in an emotionally compromised time and are trying to upsell you on something to make you feel good, when in reality, neither you nor the deceased nor anyone else, your family would have a better situation in your grave were you to take that extra money that you could have spent on all of those services and given it as sadaqah in their name. And that's the long and the short of that. So thank you for the great answers. Great questions.
Inshallah, we have about 10 more minutes for questions. Just wanted to check with the sisters. Are there any questions?
Can I get another water, please?
So I have a question regarding will. So there's a property that is left by my parents, and the 4 siblings are the inheritors. So should we make a combined will? As I've heard that if any one of us die, the money won't be given to my kids. So they cannot inherit that money.
So if you have been left property by a parent or a relative, the most important thing that you can do is actually record your right in that property, meaning that there should be a document that designates that that property is the joint ownership of the heirs of the person who had deceased. And then when you create your own will, you mention that I have a 1/10, 1/8, 1/2, whatever percentage ownership in these assets. And then of course, while you will not include those assets in the will itself, you should be creating a list of all of the properties that you have and putting them with the will. So it's not part of the legal document of the will, but it should be with the will, so that when you pass away, your family knows, okay, not only did mom pass and she owns this property, but here is the legal documentation or the deed that proves that she owns that property. It is an unfortunate it's an unfortunate event in many Muslim majority countries where parents will pass away, they'll leave the property to a number of children, and then everyone suddenly, miserliness comes to the soul, and they start fighting each other about that property. So my advice to anyone who is a joint owner of a property that was inherited is you don't necessarily have to sell the property. But there's two considerations. Number one is record the ownership rights of every person in that property. Number two, if that property is generating income, then you have a right, according to the percentage that you own, to receive that income. Thank you for your question.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Just one more question. I just wanted to clarify with term life insurance. We were talking about a term that typically, if the term runs out and you don't die, then typically there's no payout. Does Ikhlas insurance have some sort of profit sharing or something to ensure that it's not, it doesn't have elements of gambling or maisir in it?
Great question. So yes, we go through all of the companies and the contracts that offer term life to make sure that those elements are not present. But yes, with a term life policy, generally, if the policy is not used by the time the term ends, then there's nothing. However, you did receive during that time the ability to have the security and the safety of knowing that if you passed away within that 30 years, that your family would have received that money and those debts would have been paid off. Which is why we said it's not a complete solution, it's part of the solution. So you should never say, well, I've got a term life policy and that's enough. You should already be investing and saving and in buying properties and things like that. It only makes sense when it goes as part of the bigger part of the puzzle.
We have time for two more questions. We'll take one question from a brother.
There's one brother at the door.
He's from a sister, inshallah.
Here? Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Jazakallah khair. I had a question regarding husband and wife having a shared understanding about who takes care of the children in the condition that both of them pass. Is there anything from the Quran and Sunnah or any advice that you would give for the husband and wife to have that conversation so that they can agree on what happens to the children?
Thank you so much for asking this question. It's a very important question. The question was, should the husband and wife have a shared understanding of who will care for the children in the instance where both of them pass away? So, number one, let me say that it is imperative that you and your wife both have a will. And if one of you passes away, then the guardianship of the children, or what's called actually not guardianship, conservatorship is the right of the parent, automatically goes to the other parent. So this is a confusing point for some people. They list their spouse as their children's guardian in their will. A guardian is only caring for your children when both parents are dead or one of the parents is passed and the other one has been deemed unfit. So yes, if you are divorced, this is the bitter part for some people. If you are divorced and you pass away and your ex is still alive, yes, your children will go to your ex. I know you don't like them. It's okay. You don't have to like everybody. But that's the law. Common law as well as Islamic law. Unless they refuse to take the children or are deemed unfit by the court to take the children. Otherwise, you not liking somebody does not mean that you can disenfranchise them from their rights under the Shari'ah. What happens though that you and your wife are lovingly married, you and your husband are lovingly married, and you both pass away in a car accident? Have a conversation about that situation so that when you mention who will be the guardian of your children in your will and in her will, it will be the same. That will avoid confusion. Because what will happen is if you mention more than one person, generally you have a primary guardian and then a secondary, is the court will take those names and they'll simply say, okay, did they agree on this person or not? Oh, they didn't agree. Okay, we're going to have to see which of these two is closer to the children, which of the two has a better relationship with the children, which of the two has cared for the children more in their life. So they would relatively give a guardian who is close and lived a long time with the child more than they would a faraway They would give a capable person financially more than they would a person who's not capable. So being on the same page about that is very important. Islamically, it would essentially follow the laws of maintenance and inheritance, right? Meaning that depending upon the age of the child, whoever would stand in for the mother would care for the child at the ages when the mother would care for them. Meaning that if a child is before puberty and they are fit, then her mother or her mother's mother, her sister, so on and so forth. After puberty, from the father. That's a general guideline. But the ultimate rule is whatever is in the best interest of the child. That's the general Shari'ah rule. Whatever is in the best interest of the child. So making that determination, you should try to come to that determination in the will, because in the American courts, you cannot pre-decide that, or shall I say, the courts can override that. So it's better that you've kind of done the brain damage, thought through the process, and put it in the will, so that when the court comes, all they do is stamp the papers and it's considered done.
We're going to have to end things there for Isha. Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Joe, Brother Osama, for allowing us to benefit from your knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you, increase you.
Ameen. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khairan for the community for supporting this event. Barakallahu feekum. Before you leave, there are pamphlets.